Welcome back. Good afternoon. My name is Richard McCoy. I'm the director of Landmark Columbus. Exhibit Columbus is a project of Landmark Columbus, and I'm happy to have all of you here today. Thanks for coming to the 2006 J. Irwin and Xenia S. Miller Prize competition, the juried presentations. Just a bit about Exhibit Columbus. We call it an annual exploration of architecture, art, design, and community. It's a new and ambitious effort here in Columbus that's created to celebrate our design heritage while making it relevant to new audiences. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do this really with the help of a number of leaders in the community and significant funders who have made it possible. And I'll just list them briefly: is the Columbus Area Visitor Center, the Columbus Museum of Art and Design, Cummins Inc., Efrenson Family Fund, Elwood Staffing, Haddad Foundation, Heritage Fund, the Community Foundation of Bartholomew County, Irwin Sweeney Miller Foundation, Johnson Ventures, Moravec Realty, Shoemaker Family, and Saiho Insurance Services. We call that group our founding sponsors, but I want to let folks know there's plenty of room for that group to grow. We're still on the ground floor here. You can come on in. Anyway, so thanks very much to them, and thanks to Heritage Fund for sponsoring today's event. They're the presenting sponsor of this presentation. And Ball State University has very kindly brought an excellent video team down to to film this production, as they did film the symposium back in September and October. And of course, the city of Columbus has very generously let us use this remarkable building, which I like a lot. And in the same way, we're happy to be here. So it's an honor and a privilege to introduce this again. And we have 10 excellent teams. We've heard from 6 of them this morning. We're here for 4 more. And we have a jury of experts in architecture, art, and design, and community representatives for each site. And I'll just very briefly introduce them. Jung No is a publisher from August Editions. Jennifer Dunlop Fletcher is a curator at the San Francisco Museum of Art and Design. Lisa Ann Couture is an architect with Asymptote Architecture in New York. Sean Anderson is a curator at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And joining us for the final 2 presentations is Brad Manns, who has a title that is long, and I just learned the other day: Global Strategies, Facilities. I'm sorry, I should have read from my notes. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for helping us with what is turning out to be very, very difficult decisions. And so with that, I would like to invite up Ann Surak, the Director of Exhibitions for Exhibit Columbus, and Kelly Wilson, the coordinator for the Miller Prize competition, to guide us through the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So we're back from lunch. We're going to listen to the next 2 sites and 4 presentations. And our 4th site in our day, our next site, is the Cummins Corporate Office Building from 1984 by Kevin Roche and John Dinkerlew Associates Architects. A building remarkable for its surrounding urban arcade and attendant garden space, and possessing an arcade that balances between city and nature, between man and kind and nature, and is a place that Columbus residents often occupy and use. An example of Cummins' civic largesse is that they make spaces they capture for their buildings also part of the public realm. So our next finalists, the firm Baumgartner and Uriu. These 2 gentlemen are an architectural design firm in Los Angeles led by Erwin Baumgartner and Scott Uriu that is driven by digital technologies and advanced computation, utilizing new technologies and material resources. Their work has been exhibited at the Frac Center in Orléans, France, the Centre Pompidou in Paris, France, the Museum of Contemporary Art in LA, and the 12th Architectural Biennale in Venice, Italy. The firm was recently awarded the Maxine Frankel Award for Design Research, the AIA National Award for Emerging Professions, and the A+A Award for Sustainability, the Graham Grant for Advanced Studies in the Fine Arts, and the 2015 COLA Fellowship from the Department of Cultural Affairs, City of Los Angeles. We welcome Erwin and Scott. Please.
So we're honored that we have been invited to this. and to be able to contribute to the great traditions of this town, embracing design and the arts. At our last visit, we were really impressed by the cultural history of Columbus and the way how they are reflected in the community and everyday life here, doing it the Columbus way. It is great to see that the community of Columbus are continually involved in making and remaking of the city and in taking great pride of this incredible cultural design heritage, which makes Columbus such a special place. And I really appreciate so many people coming here today, all day long. So when we started thinking about our proposal for the Cummins corporate office building site, we were looking for ways that the community can engage with our proposal and create something special that continues the cultural heritage, which quite frankly was a daunting task at first. So before we start, we just want to walk you guys through kind of an overview of our presentation. So we'll start out with talking a little bit about the site and its history and how that was relevant for our approach. Then segue into the design concept and present our proposal for the Cummins site. And finally, we'll conclude with elaborating on how we're actually planning on building this thing, if awarded, and including some engineering, fabrication, and the installation process of the artwork, the fact that we think we're on budget, and on time as well. So we'll show some schedule stuff. So taking a close look at Kevin Roche and John Dinkeloo's design and the history of the site, we found that there was a very symbiotic relationship between the past and the present. Roche and Dinkeloo's design incorporate and reference the history of the site in a variety of ways, one of which is the old mill building from 1867, which they kept and remodeled. The other is a nod to the old train tracks and history of the site as a major railroad center, which used to run in a 45-degree angle, more or less, to the current orthogonal layout of the Cummins building. And the Cummins building references this in a variety of ways, which we're going to see in a second. So it's referenced in the architecture as a bold one-story sawtooth scheme, ensuring that different parts of the building retain a maximum exposure to daylight through the year and frame the old three-story mill building. And we really liked that sawtooth scheme and wanted to somehow weave this into our design concept, which we'll explain a little bit more in a moment. In terms of the location, our installation, we looked at two possible sites, both of which are in the ivied colonnade that continues the street line and frames the Cummins building. One of the locations was close to the main entrance of the headquarters, marked as B, and the other was right on the corner of 5th and Brown Street, marked as A. We ultimately decided for the location A on Brown and 5th Street for several different reasons. The piece we think would have better exposure as one approaches from Brown and 5th Street, and also not get in the way of daily operations at Cummins, main entrance. The other reason was that we felt it would make a better visual and physical connection with the other installations along the 5th Street axis, including the Miller Race Park to the west and the Irving Conference Center, the library, and the church to the east. So the next few slides kind of just go over marking the site in red. You can see a view here from Brown and 5th Street from the corner. This is looking down 5th from the park, coming down from Brown Street, looking at that corner. And another view from 5th Street was the post office building to the left. So the installation concept. As mentioned, we really like the boldness of the sawtooth scheme of the Cummins building and its reference to the site history, including the old mill building and the old train tracks. So we wanted to work with the geometric figure of the sawtooth and incorporate it in our installation. Because we felt it was an element that not only references Cummins building, but also has a connection with the history of the site at large. So here's an enlarged view of of the sawtooth plan. And then when you pull it out of its context, it becomes apparent that this will make we thought, a fantastic frame. Often our work, to kind of clarify this a little bit, deals with the idea of frames, of apertures, often. Sometimes these apertures are at large building scales. Other times they become three-dimensional objects that are inserted into the building mass. Either way, the frame and the design of the frame capture not only a specific vantage point, but shape our field of vision and become a powerful spatial driver. How we connect the inside and outside of a building, which is essential in our work. So the frame is extruded into a volume. And from that, we generated a whole family of self-similar objects that are based on the same sawtooth frame, but with slight variations in scale and size. And after setting up a set of vantage points, we fused these 12 parts into a large whole. That's essentially designed to frame a variety of views into the site. The material. The other reference for the installation was a sense of materiality that relates to the Cummins building, but also is in contrast to the concrete structure of the colonnade. So the play with transparency and reflection and the use of mirrors are definitely one of Kevin Roche's and John Dinkeloo's signature moves. Mirrors intensify the blurring of interior and exterior, suggesting that one might be working in the great outdoors while being on the inside. That's something also very close to our heart and to our approach for design. So there are many examples in their work where this effect is played out, including the Union Carbide headquarters, the Ambassador Grill in New York, and of course the Cummins office building. So we were interested in this effect of mirroring and reflection for both the interior and exterior quality of the installation. From the inside, the large apertures precisely frame particular views, while the mirror effect helps to blur the edges between inside and outside. While from the exterior, the object, by reflecting its context, camouflages into its surroundings. We started looking at a whole variety of different materials at the beginning that have the quality, but also can withstand the outdoor environment, be durable, capable of disassembly and reinstallation without being damaged, etc. So, actual mirrors, of course, were too heavy. They were so off the table. We looked at vinyl films. They're very lightweight, but we were concerned that they are too fragile for this environment and people could potentially damage it easily. So we arrived at stainless steel, and we actually looked at two different kinds of finishes, a mirror and a brushed finish, and found that to be an appropriate material for this kind of scale of installation. Now, I want to briefly touch upon one point that was an inspiration from the get-go for the project, and that has to do with machines. This idea that the installation had to relate somehow to machines had been in our heads from the beginning. When we first saw the suspended and exploded engines in the Cummins lobby, which is just an incredible cool artifact. If Cummins was about the machine of the now, our installation had to be about the machine of the future. A machine that wasn't invented yet and where one is not yet sure what it does. So suspending the object with steel wires from a frame and having it just hover barely above the ground became the way how we want to install the object on the site. Not only because of the reference to the engines in the Cummins lobby, but because it emphasizes this idea of a visual, heavy yet floating artifact. Obviously, this is not an efficient or sleek object. Instead, we wanted to create an optical and spatial machine that feels uncanny in the sense that one can ask themselves of what this thing does, how to use it, and hopefully create a curiosity to interact with it. The 12 folded volumes point towards a single interior space. The visitor has access to this space through a large cut opening along 5th Street And you can walk inside and experience the multiple vantage points and frames into the surrounding environment. The arcade and the Cummings building are also visible through these openings. The reflective nature of the material intensifies the blurring of interior and exterior, and also is a nod to the effect of mirrors in the Cummings building. From the outside, we wanted the object to have a strong silhouette that emphasizes the idea of a floating machine that expands equally in all directions. A multidirectional object that is not cut off at the bottom and grounded, but hovering above the ground. The folded surfaces not only provide the structural strengths, but more importantly reflect the environment in particular ways that blurs the boundary of what is the actual object and what is the environment that's reflected onto it. Placed on the corner of 5th and Brown Street, it's highly visible and offers multiple points of engagement with visitors at different heights, including kids and adults alike. Approaching it from the arcade, the object is framed by a concrete structure. The steel frame is hung from an integrated steel column triangle that is part of the design. So it's not touching the actual concrete trellis. So when you come down 5th Street from Millrace Park, one can see the object on the corner and the bell tower of First Christian Church in the background. Throughout the design process, we closely were consulting with a structural engineer, Matt Melnick from Naus Engineering, and Matt did some preliminary engineering for the installation to make sure it's feasible, and Scott will walk you through this part of the presentation.
Well, at the beginning, we had some discussions with the exhibition organizers about potentially hanging the installation directly from the concrete trellis. Although the object is relatively light, the organizers felt ultimately that they didn't want anything attached to the concrete structure. So our solution was to essentially build a steel frame that sits on the ground and have the object hung directly from that steel frame. The steel frame is a completely independent structure. So making the object, we zeroed in on making it out of 20 gauge stainless steel, which is a fairly thin material. To help reinforce that, we made 5 interior ribs, that are also the anchor points for the structure to be hung off the frame itself. These are an example of the 5 different ribs that are in there. These ribs will be welded basically to the 20 gauge metal on the inside of this. We also verified this with, again, with Matt Melnick from Naus Engineers on taking a look at the structural analysis of this, and there is no red, which took us a little while to get to, but there isn't really a problem necessary on this. So with that and the 5 ribs, we're able to handle this. Here's a plan view of the installation. It's approximately 23 feet by 36 feet at the outer dimensions. And here are a couple elevations of it, the 2 sectional elevations. The overall height of this is about 20 feet. This is a section cut through the center of the object, which shows the interior space that one can walk on the inside of it, as well as the intersecting volumes with the different vantage points that come out of them. For the fabrication, we've also been in close contact with a local fabricator, Brian McCutcheons from Ignition Arts in Indianapolis. And with Brian, we've walked through the different sort of variations of materials and discussion on how to fabricate this, and also how much it will cost. Essentially, we'll be using a water jet cutter or other kind of precision cutting tools to cut the exact panel patterns, and then use bending machines to crease the edges, to bend the edges, to hem them as well. The object is broken down into panels that are no wider than 4 feet for production. There are 340 of these panels, and they're all basically riveted or or bolted together from panels into these transportable pieces that are shippable on the back of a truck. Once we have them on the trucks, they come out to the site. They are lifted into place and assembled and bolted or riveted together. And also here is the project budget breakdown, the two, going over the design services, the engineering services, project management, shop drawings, materials, fabrication, labor, paint, and installation. Paint is for the steel frame itself. Obviously, the stainless steel doesn't need that. And it works out to exactly $70,000, magically. But we did actually have Brian absolutely bid this a few times in a few different ways, though, too, to verify that we were doing this correctly. So with this also, we're paying close attention to the January, July, and the July 24th installation timeframe as well. And we worked out the schedule, 2 months basically of design, development, and engineering on this. Simultaneously, we'll go through a pricing check while we're doing construction documents and the final engineering on it. That hits us into May. May, we do the final bid check with this. And then we go into the shop drawings and the fabrication of this too, which is from May until the last week in July, and then we have 1 week to install this. So we'd like to close the presentation with some images of the model and summarize the design. The installation is a site-specific installation for the Cummins corporate office building on the corner of 5th and Brown, with a number of conceptual references to Columbus, the site, and the architecture of the Cummins building. It's designed using a technique of aggregation, aggregating a family of discrete yet self-similar objects, these sawtooth frames, into a larger whole, which creates a multi-directional spatial construct that has a single interior space connected with multiple volumes and openings. These offer different spatial experiences and vantage points into the interior and out to the surrounding environment. The reflective nature of the material and the geometry of the design intensifies the blurring of the interior and the exterior spaces. And with the intention to create an optical and spatial machine that allows a visitor to experience architectural space in new ways and encourages curiosity and interaction with it. Hervig and I would like to thank you.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. Can you just walk through the process that generated the form again? Because I think that went quickly for me.
Yeah.
You were fearful that was too long.
So, hold on, all the way back here. So there's two ideas essentially. One is a geometric reference to the Cummins building itself, which had to do with this sawtooth frame. So basically, this is essentially a sampling of some of that frame that then gets extruded, multiplied, and assembled into a single object. So they're basically intersecting or aggregation of these pieces.
Some of the extrusion is in multiple directions?
Yeah, they're all in a different direction.
Yeah.
So basically, we have like 12 of those.
And then how did this come about? This is the step that I'm unclear about.
The cutting at the end?
The kind of crashing or joining of the different
That was
parts.
basically trying to set up an object that has no top and bottom, essentially. That was the whole idea of keeping it floating. So it's a multi-directional object that's kind of evenly weighted at top, bottom, and on the sides. So we set up these vantage points. Some of them have to do with actual views towards the side, which we didn't really get that into in this presentation, but that's basically how they were configured. And that's, so basically when you stand inside that center space, you have different views out, and they start framing different parts of them.
Just curious, is that all done digitally? Do you just model it and you just
Yes.
kind of do a 3D?
Yeah, this is
rendering?
all
Yeah.
a digital
You
process.
didn't build any models at this point?
We did in the end, but that's that's
Right.
a representational
Yeah.
model. Yeah.
Oh, is there an interior condition expressed? So
Yes.
once you
So there's
look
basically,
inside.
if you come to the model, we can also, there's an image also we can show. Maybe you can show the model, pull up that image.
So there's a central cut underneath here, basically, and so that you can go around it. We've also set these at different heights.
Yeah, so basically there's an entrance right at the beginning here. So from 5th Street, you can walk straight into this thing. This is about 9 or 8 feet tall right here. So you can walk to the inside, and then basically it's your head is up in the quote unquote machine. And on the image on the left is kind of what you see as you enter that kind of like.
But also, each of the apertures are set at different heights, so that different people, as you walk around it, can see into this and out of it at different viewpoints, vantage points. Children, very tall human beings, and normal sized people.
It's both for avatars and people.
Does the mirroring that you are representing on the exterior happen on the interior in the same way?
Yeah, it happens in the same way. I mean, we in these renderings, it's a mixture between those two finishes. So to kind of, when we walked through this, it was, the outside is mostly mirrored, and the inside there's a mixture of those two different things, mostly to just not turn it into a, what do you call it, a funhouse, like where everything is distorted, but like to actually have some mass and some surfaces with reflectivity on it.
And then what are some of you talked a little bit about seeing down the portico, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other specific view axes that you are hinting at? Are they historical? Are they contextual?
I mean, they're definitely contextual. I mean, we're looking at different parts of, on the back side of the Cummins building. There's really strong views up and down the colonnade on both sides. There's some views out onto Brown Street as well. And then there's just some views they point up or down. So really looking at the texture of the paving and looking at the trellis and the sky. So those are some of those angles.
And some of it's irrefutable though too. There's access to the Saranen Church though too. If you stand on the inside and you're looking out one of these as well though too. So.
Can you help me understand your thought process on the scale?
You mean why is it that big? It's a good question. I mean, we actually played around with this quite a bit, trying to understand. Well, we were really looking, especially the view you're looking at, as the colonnade as being like a picture frame for the object, more or less, right? So it was, we sized it for one of those modules, and so it does this from both sides. And especially since we wanted to hang it, and we couldn't hang it from the concrete, we knew that. So we wanted to also, we mimicked that column grid basically out of steel and hanging it from that, our own grid essentially. So that's really
part of it, the good part of it. And then the other part of it is we're also maximizing the budget, Brad. So, this is the biggest object we can get for that budget as well in a realistic manner. So the very pragmatic reason.
Just one more question on you're suspending, right? So any concerns around wind or how this thing's going to stay put?
Well, we looked at this with our engineer very closely because I know that was one of your concerns. So it's basically the steel wires are triangulated at the top, and we are going to have at the bottom a few wires that hold it down so it can't swing. And yeah, that's how I think we can get that stable.
was just wondering if you spoke about two different materials. What is the strategy? How do you not get the funhouse effect you want, but how do you get something that you do want? Is there a sort of formula of two adjacent planes and not a third one, or?
It's a little bit of a visualization thing, which we're gonna get really into detail if we do this. But essentially, what happens is if you have opposite. So we try to basically in the rendering scene, we try to on the opposite side have a flat finish. So there's a certain like range of reflection. So we would sand the parts that are opposing this, and then it's a little bit like the Cummings building having stripes or areas of reflection rather than the whole thing being just a reflective thing. But you know, that's also something that we'll have to work out in detail. We looked at one particular area, and it was rather complex to simulate that, and to visualize it. But you know, that would be part of working through this.